With Dr. Lee Mills. I will put everybody on mute. If you want to ask a question, please just unmute your line and you can ask the question. We're getting a lot of feedback again today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mills, and he has an expert with him, it sounds like, and I'll let him introduce.
Thanks so much, Jolene and Dale. Appreciate the hour and chance to talk through some of the intricacies of CPC Plus and an application. I'm happy to have with me today Morgan Barrell, who's Director of Clinical Operations at St. John, and she's the person that pretty much single-handedly helped drive all of the health systems applications for our 35 sites into CPC Plus.
Good morning.
Or afternoon, I suppose, technically. Well, the way we're going to organize today was to go through the questions. I appreciate all the teams that did send Jolene questions. We want to be sure we address each of those and allow enough back and forth conversation to feel like they're understood. I thought I would then point to a pro forma that I ran through showing each clinic with as accurate a patient count as we can get for you that Jolene provided, what the cash flow implications of CPC Plus might be for your site. And then hopefully have about half our time left to work through the actual application. I'll point out some resources, and I'll make sure nobody worry about taking notes, tracking this stuff down. I'll make sure Jolene has the link or the resource to send out. But there are some good resources that people want to get intimately familiar with. So with that, let's just start. Hopefully everybody's seeing the screen that's working. If not, someone will let me know. And we do want this to be interactive. There are no slides today besides what you're seeing on the screen, and we're just going to work through this, and then please ask follow-up questions as we go. So the first question was, with this partnership with state Medicaid agencies, the question was, just explain that if you're receiving a PMPM from your state managed Medicaid organization, will you lose it? And the answer is no. Under CPC Classic, even though Medicare does not traditionally cover, children in reproductive age pregnant ladies, which is the bulk of the state Medicaid rolls, in CPC Classic, Medicare did basically pass money to the states for a PMPM. They're not doing that in CPC Plus. If you already have a PMPM agreement with your state Medicaid agency, that continues. Okay. So no, you're not going to lose your PMPM. Whatever separate contract arrangement you have with your state Medicaid will continue. Any follow-up questions on that? Okay. Then there's a question about this interface between CPC Plus and MSSP. And the question is, since you're a Track 1 ACO, you would not, this is with a MIPS QPP perspective, since you're a Track 1 MSSP, that's true under MIPS, you don't qualify as an advanced APM. Okay, hearing a lot of additional noise. Someone's got the phone unmuted. Okay. The implications of not being an advanced APM are that the cons are you won't get the automatic 5% physician fee schedule update over 5 years. So if you're an advanced APM for, I believe, 2020 through 2025, if I remember the chart correctly, you get 5% to the physician fee schedule update to your clinic site automatically over those 5 years if you're an advanced APM. And then following that 5 years, I believe starting in 2026, your base update every year would be 0.75%. If you're not an advanced APM, your base update is 0.25% into the future. And so you'd miss out on that. And the last con would be that as part of CPC Plus in an MSSP Track 1, you would have to report for MIPS. But remember when I joined you in Nebraska for your annual meeting, the implications of of MIPS in a QPP, or being an MSSP1 for MIPS, is that your quality measures are the ACO measures you're familiar with. There is no cost reporting for you. You get automatic 100% credit for practice improvement activities, the CPIA category, and then all you have to actually report is the advancing care information category. So those are the cons. You don't have the 5% automatic update. Your base update starting in 2026 is lower than if you're an advanced APM, and you would have to report in MIPS. So the pros are the MSSP does give you favorable scoring in MIPS compared to what you would get alone. The MSSP gives you the power of the safe harbors you get in an ACO are not to be underestimated. It allows you to systematize and organize yourselves in ways that would be completely illegal under federal law, under the Stark referral anti-kickback statutes. And it gives you the ability for patient care optimization, because you also can extend the safe harbor to what would otherwise be considered patient inurements, meaning inside the bounds of an ACO, if the board decides to extend the safe harbor, you could give all patients with congestive heart failure who've had a hospital stay an electronically linked weight scale that would measure their weight, send it to you automatically. You could give all the diabetics a free glucose meter. You could give hypertensives a blood pressure cuff that might electronically send you data. That's not possible outside the bounds of an ACO. So the pros, the benefits are favorable scoring to MIPS. It lets you organize and systematize in a way that would be illegal, and it lets you give clinically useful things to patients that would otherwise be inurements that would be illegal. So any follow-up questions to that? Pros and cons of being an MSSP with CPC. Okay. There was a question about this confusing paragraph, and I agree it's written in a very confusing fashion. The short version is, if you're in an MSSP Track 1, in an MSSP of any type, and CPC+, if you leave the MSSP, you are now just in CPC+, and therefore would be exempted from MIPS as of the start of the next year. Any follow-up or questions about that?
But that would mean that they would have to do all their own reporting, right? And everything.
That would mean they would lose all the safe harbors. They would have to do all of their own reporting, including the technical support and the funding of that. Yes, you'd lose all the expertise, the administrative support that you get in the MSSP. So what can we use the funds on CPC+? There is a list. I sent this to Jolene. It's in the implementation guide, pages 19 and 20. I don't have that pulled up, but let me do that. We should talk through it. Let me let Morgan go on to answer the next question while I pull up the implementation guide and show you that.
Okay. So the next question was, is there an issue of releasing commercial payer data about our patients to CMS? None. Like he says here, HIPAA allows sharing of information to payers related to paying claims, businesses, processes, etc. So there is no issue whatsoever there. The next question.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Do we have to notify our patients that we will be releasing that information to CMS, like our Blue Cross Blue Shield patients? I know when we got into the health information exchange, we had to make sure that our patients knew what we were doing with their information. Will we have to put posters up or anything up in our offices to notify the patient?
Yes, there is a little letter that you put in your office. I think you also have the choice of mailing it out, but it's not required. That just says we're part of CPC+, and I can include that. I can give that to Dr. Mills so he can send what it looks like to you. And it also has the opt-out information if a patient wishes not to have their information shared. It tells them how they can go ahead and opt out of that. Any other questions about that? Okay. The next question is, what type of reporting will we need to do for our commercial patients? Kind of variable depending on your payer. Most get it directly from Medicare. Some require direct reporting. It just depends on your payer. You won't know what happens or what your payer, how they want you to proceed until after you've been accepted, and then they share the contract with you to go over the requirements. Any follow-up questions on that one?
So most payers are getting their CPC Plus data directly from Medicare. There is one private payer in the Oklahoma, which is full state market, like Nebraska. It's a payer that we share in common, though different version of that payer, that is requesting some data be sent directly to them. But that is the only a single payer is doing that I'm aware of. So let's go back to this question about spending funds for CPC Plus on. It's in the CPC Plus implementation guide, page 19 to 20. This is one of the resources we're going to make sure you all have access to. This is a key resource you're going to want to know everything about. Okay. Is that coming through, Jolene? Everybody can see that?
Yes, we can.
So you must use the care management fees to support your CPC work. So first of all, it's important to split out. Remember, the money flow in CPC Plus is 3 different streams. One is your fee-for-service. In track 1, you're receiving 100% of your fee-for-service billing. Nothing about your work stream changes. You see a patient, you bill a patient for every service. Remember, in track 2, it gets more complex. Very few of the folks on the call probably will qualify for track 2, so it's probably easiest to think track 1 is fee-for-service is what you're used to. The care management fee is the PNPM you're getting monthly. That has some particulars about it we're going to go through. The third stream is your performance incentive. You're not eligible for the performance incentive from CPC Plus because you're in an MSSP. You will still have the possibility of shared savings through your MSSP. That's your third money stream. So focusing in on the care management fees. Permitted expenses include but are not limited to, in all of our conversations with the CPC Plus help desk and answer desk folks, they're pretty clear. This really isn't an exhaustive list. These are examples. But permitted is wages for staff, care managers, coordinators, behaviorists, scribes, pharmacists, pre-visit planner, care coordinator, any staff that you need to add to perform care delivery requirements, and that is written very broad. If you're improving quality, efficiency, value, process, staff are completely on the table to add to this. Wages for existing staff to perform care delivery requirements. If you just funded out of normal operations a care manager in the past, just because it's the right thing to do for patients, now you can actually offset some of those wages through your care management fee. Care delivery tools, like if you want to make a shared decision-making aid on cardstock that's laminated, you want to have a iPad, Survey Monkey survey about a screening question. If there's something that you're developing or designing or creating that's a tool to help care delivery, quality, value, efficiency, that's fine. Travel and training, such as attending learning meetings, collaboratives, all that kind of stuff. And then all activities within the scope of care delivery requirements. That is super, super broad. So an easier way maybe to think about this is, what are the few things Medicare has said you can't use the money for? Well, you can't use the care management fee specifically to buy an IT system or an upgrade. Income tax payments on any revenue you have left over after expenses, and we'll come back on that point. Imaging or DME, medications like, if you stock Rocephin in the clinic to give to patients, you can't use that money. And remember, you have to separately account for your care management fee money. I don't know how each of you have your finances set up, in the health system, we have different accounting units or departments set up to account for the incoming money flow for care management fees, and that we then attribute direct CPC expenses to that same accounting unit so you can track it. And that is required. CME, if it's not about CPC Plus, if it is about CPC Plus, you can use it. Costs related to billing and coding, not related to CPC Plus. Office supplies or decorations. Payments to participating practitioners for purposes other than supporting work related to CPC. Well, with all due respect, you can drive a semi-truck through that, and again, I'll come back to that, but you can't take a cut off the top. The care management fee comes in every month, and every month 10% of it is shared with the owners of the clinic. You can't do that. You can account for all of your care management fees, you have all of your CPC Plus expenses, and at the end of the year, there's some money left, and part of that goes to the clinic for overhead, and part of that goes to the salary pool. That is okay. That is overtly, we've had that conversation with Medicare, that is okay. Now, if it just happened to mysteriously be you only spent 50% of your care management fee money, that's probably not okay. It's too high a ratio. If you had 10 or 15 or 20% of your care management fee left, that probably is okay. That is not written down in black and white anywhere. That's our impression from talking with auditors at CPC Plus, and that is how it is worked out here at St. John. And we have had both a program and a finance audit each of the last 2 years, and there was some money left over at the end of the year, and that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, you just have to justify the money left over, or if you overspent based on, staffing, maybe you couldn't hire a care manager, and so you just have to justify what happened there. But they were really just, it's more of a research and to find out why you did have extra, and then what are you going to do with it for the following year. So,
if part of your compensation plan has money at risk for value and quality, money left over can help fund that. And then lastly, payments to a care management company. So they're basically saying, look, you can't take care management fees. They're meant to build capability within the practice for better care and just pass it off to some national company who says they can do your care management and charge you $10 PMPM. They want each practice to build the capability internally. So any questions or that is the list, page 19 and 20 of the implementation guide, about what is and is not okay to spend care management fees on. I'll pause for questions.
Hey Lee, this is Logan Pritchard.
Logan?
Wrapping my head around that, I just trying to get a feel for what that's going to do for accounting for our clinics and how to even start thinking about preparing for that amount of work. Like, it's with you being a larger organization than ours, kind of thing. Like, do we do that on the clinic level? Is that something that's best done at the ACO level? Can like several clinics share accountant or?
This is paid at a tax ID level.
Okay.
And so, and down to the site clinic level. So each clinic would be paid the money stream for your CPC Plus care management fee.
Right.
And for a practice, it could be as simple as you have the money, because when you fill out the application, you tell Medicare what bank account and routing number you want your care management fees and incentive payments to go to.
Okay.
And it could be as simple as you have a separate bank account for the revenue coming in for these, and then you pay expenses out of that account. And that would make your accounting, frankly, fairly simple.
Okay. Has the proving that to what you're spending it on to Medicare been overwhelming? Like, is the information they require to show, like your care coordinator spent 35% of her time on Blue Cross this month, and now we got to deduct 35%. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just see like a nightmare.
You don't have to do that. It would be more like that. The care manager is doing CPC Plus functions, and her salary is $61,500.
Yeah, I had to provide job descriptions. When we had the program audit, we had to provide job descriptions, W-2 information, and then every year for CPC, at least in Classic, we had to say how much, obviously, of the care management fees went to what. So went to care managers, went to provider quality bonus or quality payments, and went to IT. And so when we went back for the audit purposes, I just had to reconcile and make sure everything matched up there. So it wasn't too difficult at all.
Okay. So they're not saying that you have to pay us back for the care coordination that was not spent on Medicare because 100% of their time wasn't spent on Medicare CPC Plus directly.
Correct, yeah.
No.
Because
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we focused on all payers, so it wasn't broken down by Classic.
And that's something to help, and I've tried to describe this, but this really is a change in the thinking you've been used to under the ACO. CPC is a multi-payer pilot at this point.
Right.
Spread. You do the same processes for whole population. And in different parts of the implementation guide, they say very overtly, you're expected to use all processes you build for all patients regardless of payer.
Okay. Okay.
So it lets you get your mind off of need to do certain things for these Medicare patients because we're in an MSSP.
Right.
To really, frankly, free your brain up and say, let's just treat our patients better across the board. And then when you reconcile the money with Medicare, there is no belief you have to parcel out just what you spent for Medicare. They just want to, CPC is multi-payer. So they say for this whole project, what did you spend versus what you received?
And I would say that's the mindset we took. I was just worried that Medicare was going to come back and say, okay, you owe us 35% of this person's time because you spent it on other payers or whatever. So
not at all.
Okay, good. Okay.
Hey, this is Brian at McCook Clinic. I was wondering if I have to lease additional office space and exam room space, is that something you could use some of those funds to offset for additional to house these folks, our care coordinators and stuff?
That's a great question, Brian. We don't know the answer overtly, and this is, we have read over the last 3 years thousands of pages about CPC Plus. So I'll tell you what we know in black and white, and if we don't know it, then I'll tell you what we think to the best of our experience, having lived this life for a while. We've never read that in black and white anywhere. It's a great question. Our instinct, she and I both made frowny faces at the same time. Our instinct is, no, that's probably not going to be an okay use of the money. CPC Plus does a really good job of letting you queue up those questions and ask the questions and get an answer back, usually in reasonable time, which is about 2 weeks maybe. So the CPC Plus answer desk has been really pretty good. Now, when you think about that, that shouldn't be a showstopper for you. You've got practice money to rent more exam rooms. You then want to find what are practice expenses that you could then just instead shift to CPC revenue.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how creative I'm going to have to get. Thank you.
A little creative sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so good question. We'll make sure Jolene has that resource for you. We're going to go on down with these questions. So reporting we talked about. In general, every payer gets it through Medicare, by and large. So the question about DPC, and there are very few things Medicare has said is just off the table, but direct primary care practice, FQHCs, and rural health clinics may not participate in CPC Plus. That's just all, and it doesn't matter how you stretch the definition, they've defined it as if you're a practice that gets any type of a monthly membership fee, care management fee, enrollment fee, any type of monthly support outside of normal billing, they consider that a DPC or concierge style practice, and so that's out of the pilot. Good question here. What happens when funding dollars for CPC Plus are gone? Now, first of all, I'm going to answer this a couple of different ways. First way is it's funding itself. So CPC Classic Year 3, 2015 program year, saved $30 million in net savings. The program year 2, 2014, had net savings to a smaller degree, and we're expecting the final year of CPC Classic in 2016 to also have net savings closer to 15 than 14. The whole reason Medicare went forward and said, fine, we're going to change from 7 regions to 15 regions, and from 1,500 practices to 5,000 practices. The patient volume went from 1 million patients total to 5 million patients total, is because quality is improving, it is reducing costs. So there really is no funding problem for CPC Plus. It is self-generating funding. It's one of the few or only part of the federal healthcare budget that is generating its own revenue. So I don't think that's a concern. Secondly, from a different perspective, what are our best tea leaf readers saying? And while this is a program out of Center for Medicaid Medicare Innovation Services, CMMI, and that was set up with the ACA, CMMI is well liked by both sides of the aisle in Congress. In all of the healthcare bills and sausage making that's happening in DC, no one has proposed disfunding CMMI. You think about how the politics work, they have to pay for the bills. And this one generates savings they can use to offset other expenses. If they actually cancel this, they have to find more money to pay for canceling it. So neither the financing nor the politics give me any concern about the survival of CPC Plus over 5 years. The third idea is to say, if you look at Medicare's track over multiple changes that are a trial balloon 1 year, they push on it again the next year, they implement it small 1 year, and then 5 or 6 years later it goes big. After 5-year CPC Plus, the best congressional watchers and Medicare watchers believe probably this will be the model that doesn't get stepped up again. It's the model for how Medicare pays for primary care in the country. The next step is probably everybody. So CPC is really not going to go away.
And what we looked into when we didn't know about CPC Plus was really how can we continue to pay for our care managers or our care coordinators after Classic had ended. So we started piloting or doing PDSAs with Medicare wellness visits. What could that do for us, and how many wellness visits would it take to pay for each of our care managers that would still allow them to do the discharge information and the other tasks that we were doing? And it really, they paid for themselves at that point.
Yeah, so that's the ultimate fallback position. If a meteor strikes Bethesda and something crazy happens, and politics has been a little bit crazy lately, what happens? Well, what happens is you can pay at least the staff overhead you pay for out of fee-for-service revenue, and it's chronic care management, transition care management, and Medicare wellness visits. Two Medicare wellness visits a day pay for an RN level care manager. I think the number was 2.3 services. So you could pay for these positions in fee-for-service revenue if you had to. Another option is that you're then in a very strong position with 5 years of data to go back directly to the payers and employers for value-based contracting directly. So that's the ultimate fallback, is you're better positioned than all of your peers that didn't do this. Because whatever they call it, the old fee-for-service, pay-for-transaction, see a patient, bill a patient as fast as you can, that world has gone away or is going away. And no healthcare purchaser is going to go backwards after this 5 years. Okay, great question. Oh, my answer didn't stick there. If you apply for Track 2, can you go back to Track 1? The answer is yes. If you apply for Track 2 and you're accepted in Track 2, you can, on the contract that you fill out, notify that you're choosing to stay at Track 1. That's okay. It is interesting with the control group. That's a feature of this second round that didn't exist in the first round. In the first round, scads and scads of people applied. Certain people were told they were in CPC Plus. My belief is, and what I've read between the lines is, those who applied but were not accepted, they are the control group, right? For round 2, they've made it more overt, and they're saying, of the people who apply, we're going to divide that group up into active and control. Yes, the control group's going to get, I read, $5,000 administrative overhead fee. There's nothing expected. There's no money. There's no outcomes. There's no reporting. You go on business as usual, and once a year, a few times a year, they ask for some data and pay you an overhead fee for that. I think you absolutely have the chance to decline that participation. So I don't see any downside. They've also said they want a successful experiment. You get a successful experiment in this world by having as many practices from a coordinated system or MSSP in together at the same time. It does not suit their purposes for half of SERPA to be accepted and the other half put in the control group. There will be plenty of single or unaffiliated groups, clinics applying to be the control. So they know that this is a scalability experiment in coordinated, multi-site, multi-payer care improvement. And so I think if multiple SERPA sites approve, the odds are extremely high that you would expect to be accepted altogether. Any questions about that? Okay. If you apply and are accepted, can you decide not to participate, and is there a contract? And the answer is absolutely. So if you're accepted, yes, there is a final kind of contract application, which we lived through. It took some work, but it wasn't terrible. And you can decline to turn that in, and then you just wouldn't participate. If you then apply, you're accepted, and you complete the participation agreement, there is always a 90-day out clause. At any time, you can notify Medicare with 90-day head start and get out of CPC Plus. Once you've applied and are accepted to CPC Plus, then there is a contract addendum with the private payers, and in Nebraska that means Blue Cross Blue Shield in Nebraska. The latest list I saw, that was the only private payer participating in CPC in Nebraska. Any questions on that? Okay, a question about impact and interrelationship. So Medicare invited commercial payers to participate, and then it chose the regions that had sufficient private payer interest that it was going to get them a convincing experiment, meaning they had to have enough patients in addition to Medicare involved in the state to make it useful. In Nebraska, Blue Cross Blue Shield has such a dominant market share that even though they're the only ones who either applied to participate or were selected to participate, that's the lion's share of patients in Nebraska in addition to Medicare. So that's a compelling experiment. After that, each payer agrees in a contract with each of these payers have a contract with Medicare. And they essentially are agreeing to participate following Medicare's guidelines but not details. So basically, they support value. They'll have payment for better coordination, higher value care. They get to choose their own amount of PMPM, care management fee, for track 1 or track 2. They get to choose their own methodology for how shared savings is going to work, how much, what the criteria are, etc. Any questions on that? Sorry, lost my screen there. I tried to see the questions that have been submitted, and I lost my screen sharing. Are you seeing the screen again, Jolene?
Yes, and I don't see any questions that have been submitted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, so those are the questions that have been submitted. Are there any other general questions? We're going to next kind of go through some application. I'm going to show you the spreadsheet for the pro forma that I roughed out, and then try to go through the application in our last 30 minutes. Any questions at this point? Okay. So what you should now be seeing is an Excel spreadsheet. Are you seeing that?
No, we're back to the questions. It was there and then it disappeared.
You see it now?
No.
Well, that's what's on the desktop I'm sharing.
Try again and see if it'll load.
Okay, how's that?
Got
There
it.
it is.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so just to orient everybody, practices in SERPA. Jolene, through the managers, told us number of physicians, mid-levels, rough number of front office and clinical staff, number of care managers. That stuff is not, not used in this pro forma. It is mainly just to understand where each of you are. The number of care managers you have on site was useful. The biggest part of this is this piece here to say patient count. So that column is the number of Medicare patients, number of Blue Cross of Nebraska patients. Let's speak for a minute about this column I, which is routinely creating care plans. So one of the qualifications, and actually the answer to this question lets us not laboriously go through the qualifications. One of the extra above and beyond qualifications to be accepted or apply for Track 2 is you have proven experience and track record of doing formal plans of care for patients. There was only 2 sites in SERPA that said you had experience doing a more formalized kind of care plan, and one of them was just experimenting with it. So in general, that plus some other factors make me say probably the power of being organized using your SERPA safe harbors is to do the same track together. Only 1 or 2 sites even qualify to apply for Track 2. My strong recommendation is the group consider doing Track 1 together. The overall thresholds, the benchmarks for succeeding in Track 1 this first year, or what would be your first year, are very, very low. We've gone over that at a prior talk, but first year achievement in Track 1 is basically attribute all of your patients to a PCP, make the EHR available to whoever's covering the patient after hours, do a patient family advisory council at each site at least once in the year, track a, quote, sizable and increasing number of ED patients, and then track 75, prove you're tracking 75% of your hospital transitions of care within 48 hours. That's basically the only demonstrable achievements you have to do for Track 1, Year 1. That is stuff that all of you are doing or doing most of. I like to say that ACO really told us what we needed to do. That started the idea of if you do better care, you improve quality, you might get some money back. It tells you what to do. CPC Plus is what shows you how to do that, right? So the process and the method when you get in CPC Plus, having team meetings each week or each month, focusing on data you get from Medicare and Blue Cross, doing PDSAs and having to turn in some PDSAs quarterly to CPC Plus, all of that, frankly, helps you mechanically go through the steps to improve your care. And it really does work. So back to the pro forma. So Medicare Track 1, Medicare's $15 PMPM, and I'm going to use Central Nebraska Medical Clinic. I don't even know if they're on the phone, but your line is at the top. $15 PMPM is $15,000 based on 1,000 Medicare patients. The math is nice there. $15,000 extra cash flow a month. This is doing basic normal care stuff you're doing now. It's like finding change on the sidewalk. It's extra money for what you're doing with very little on top of that besides quarterly reporting, which is frankly not too onerous. It's pretty straightforward. Annualized 180 grand. Blue Cross Blue Shield. I am completely making up this number out of there. I haven't actually read the CPC Plus contracts for Blue Cross in multiple states. I made up the number $4. But if it were $4, it'd be an extra $4 grand, annualized $48,000 a year. So for Central Nebraska Clinic, 228 grand in additional revenue above every dime you're already billing now. Realize that CPC Plus is a 5-year pilot. That'd be $1.1 million of additional revenue. You know, all of primary care's heartburn with Medicare and with the RUC process over the last generation since 1992 is that it's a fixed pie. If a 99214 value is increased, they take that value out of every other code in the book. And so increases and decreases get averaged out, and you never really win. And there's just no additional money coming into the system. This is brand new money coming into the system on top of everything you're doing now. If you look down, we would say, so for SERPA ACO, it's an additional $5.4 million a year in new revenue, or $27 million over 5 years of revenue above and beyond normal business operations. And our care has gotten better. Our cost is going down. You have the possibility of shared savings. It's a little challenging in the MSSP because your care management fee is considered an expense for the MSSP, so it goes into your cost basis. But if you do really well, you still can share savings. That's just a very, so each clinic has its number. That additional revenue per year is pretty compelling. If you just look at your care managers, so, you know, an RN care manager in the Oklahoma market is making 62 grand a year, and an LPN care manager is 45-ish. You have paid for your care managers, probably increased their scope. You can hire additional care managers, and that's even just a fraction of less than half of what any of these sites are getting per year. So it lets you implement new workflows, hire a counselor, contract with a part-time pharmacist, lets you do all kinds of things that, frankly, most of us had wished we'd been able to do over time. I will scroll over here to show track 2. Blue Cross in multiple states, I don't know what they're going to do in Nebraska, I have no intelligence about that, but in multiple states, Blue Cross's supplemental CPC contract has not had a PMPM care management fee in track 2. They've taken the stance that these are practices more sophisticated. And the big money's in shared savings. They shouldn't need the care management fee. They should just hold on for shared savings. So if even everybody in Nebraska was doing care plans, you would see that your total yearly amount is not very much higher than track 1 because it's Blue Cross. If you had 5 other payers in CPC Nebraska, it'd be a different situation, but you don't. So keeping the bar low, taking the track 1 money and moving forward is my strong recommendation. Realize that you make application, that then gives you several months to sort through the details and decide how you're going to do this. So the real deadline is just getting your application in. You'll then have time to figure out if you really want to pursue it. Any questions there? I'll pause. There was a question from Jerry Thiessen. Can we include the cost of benefits in addition to W-2 wages? Yes. I believe it's total cost of ownership, total cost of salary and benefits.
And as long as you can prove, you know, whatever you put on the yearly budget, and then once they ask for the W-2s for an audit purpose, as long as they match up and you can justify what you did, they seemed fine with that.
Yeah, in the audits, they've wanted us to be able to explain what we did and why we did it with numbers. At almost no point did they ever say, well, you can't do that, or you shouldn't have done that, or that's done wrong, and give us back the money. They just want a rational explanation for what you spent the money on.
Did you guys?
Okay, this is Ava at Plum Creek. I'm sorry, Jolene. I just had a question. Okay, so you're saying that you have a totally separate bank account, more or less? Is that my understanding? Because these checks go direct into that,
Yes,
correct?
that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
so as long as you just show that everything that's going out of that is paying for all this added care, whether it's all the travel or training or care coordinator, everything can
Yeah.
just come out of that bank account. And
Yeah,
then you
can
just
even say,
roll
well,
the money.
you wanted to pay for half, you're going to add, you have 2 care managers with the extra funding, their ratio of active care management is too high, you want to add a 3rd position and pay for half of the FTE with care management fee. You could just transfer the money from the care management account to the usual business account, and then you would just be able to track that was half the salary was sent to the normal business account to pay the bills. So it's not even.
Can you use it on current positions?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Current positions that you already have, like your current care coordinator and current,
Yes, if they're doing things to improve the care and value and quality of your care system, absolutely.
okay. And all the nurses that spend hours, trying to look up patients and all the time, you can keep track of what they're doing on a daily basis?
I mean, theoretically,
Pre-visit
yes.
planning?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't allocate our MA time to CPC. We wanted more care managers. We wanted a better ratio of care managers to our high-risk patients, and since we were already paying for MAs, it just made sense to keep that way. But I mean,
Sure,
technically,
okay.
yes.
Could we put, I got Logan asked, could we put our actual Blue Cross Blue Shield PMPM in the spreadsheet? Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to provide this spreadsheet, and you would just change that number right there in cell L5, and it would change, all the numbers would flow. That's why I built the equations that way. But the PMPM you're getting from Blue Cross now isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about a CPC Plus Blue Cross addendum contract that will have a CPC Plus PMPM. I don't know how that's going to interface with the Blue Cross PMPM you're getting through the MSSP. That's an interface that SERPA leadership is going to have to work through. Jolene, have you had any intelligence about that?
Yes.
We've gotten information on our next contract with Blue Cross, and I thought it was supposed to mimic what they're planning on doing with CPC Plus in our, so I'm guessing it would be similar, right? Am I thinking?
Yeah, what it will be, Logan, it is risk stratified, and so the non-union healthy, they'll get $1. Stable is $2. At risk 6. Simple chronic 9. Complex chronic 18, and critical 6. And we could actually go into what we have for your patients, I think, and get them risk stratified. I'm looking at LaGreer to say that and tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, and tell you.
I already have it, I think.
I was just saying put in an average.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like the $15, what we saw in the UR reports is most of you did not make a total of 15. Everybody was a little bit below because the risk score was a little lower for all of us. But it wasn't, I think the lowest one was like 13.25. But but it was still a lot better than 0. So yeah,
if you knew the number of patients in each of those risk buckets for Blue Cross,
right,
it would be pretty easy just to expand and make the Blue Cross patient count the exact number of patients in each of the risk buckets, and then make multiple PMPMs queuing to the different risk buckets. You can expand this and figure out very precisely what you're going to get.
right.
So
Okay.
it's a little bit, the language I'm hearing, it confuses me just a little bit. You're going to want to track this down. In every other market, people have a contract with Blue Cross. When you're accepted to CPC, there is a Blue Cross CPC Plus addendum. I don't think it's as simple as you've got a new contract from Blue Cross through the MSSP. I think there will still be a CPC Plus addendum in addition to that.
Yeah, what we're going to be getting from Blue Cross on our new contract has nothing to do with CPC Plus.
Right.
We're going to be getting about a $5.65 payment based on the risk stratification, and I have all the information for what the subsequent clinics can get based on your attribution if you'd like that.
Okay.
But my understanding from Blue Cross in our initial conversations about this contract and just speaking about CPC Plus, hasn't been a lot of conversations about it yet because they just got accepted and no one from our clinic has accepted.
Oh, and even in the Oklahoma market where we knew they were going to be in, essentially they wouldn't tell us anything about it until they were in and we were in. I mean, they're not going to show cards of what they're going to do until you're in.
Right. I just don't want people to get confused that our current contract for ACO for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska Commercial, that per member per month has nothing to do with CPC Plus.
Right.
So they had to agree to support CPC Plus alongside CMS. So essentially we're going to have to sign another contract with them, whoever is in CPC Plus, for that participation.
Okay.
Right. Right. Okay, we're
when
down
I looked
to
at the Blue Cross contract, it just looked enough like the things I was seeing from CPC Plus. I thought they had enough foresight to just go ahead and make that the contract, and then it just rolls into CPC Plus. But I was mistaken, so that's fine.
Well, and I don't know that you're fully mistaken because what you all have done with Blue Cross through SERPA in Nebraska is far ahead of what most ACOs have done with their private payers.
Okay.
So it may be that since CPC Plus wasn't available, they were paralleling that work. Blue Cross was involved in CPC Classic all over the country, and they just shared the learnings, and they were headed that way. So it'll be interesting to hear when and if you all are accepted to CPC Plus, what Blue Cross does with their contract, because actually the terms you're getting are very favorable to what I've heard other regions have gotten. I think your market's ahead just through SERPA's work and the work you've already done. So let's talk about the practice application. We've got 10 minutes left. I want to try to do some of this. This is a very useful application checklist. We'll make sure Jolene has it. Essentially, it says you want this information before you apply. Contact information. Every site will have a site contact and a EHR HIT contact. There has to be a named physician champion, essentially. There's a physician leader at each site that has to be named. You can change it later at any time, and you're not committing to anything besides they want to know physicians support this, are engaged. So number of providers, physicians, PAs, primary care practitioners, including full-time and part-time staff. So you see all the categories there for each provider, MPI, specialty, etc. If you're operated by a large organization, what are the details of that organization? Your TIN going back to 2013, because your expected spend is based on Medicare data back to 13. They have to know your TINs. If you're in an ACO, what it is in the ACO TIN, what your EHR certification ID and vendor is, information about any additional population health tools you use. Like I understand you all are interacting with an HIE, getting some data through the HIE, so you need some details from that the ACO leadership can provide. Information about practice revenue and budget. 2016 revenue total stratified by payer, and then just patient percentages. So Medicare wants to know you have to have 150 Medicare patients per provider for the providers to participate. No, per site. It was per site. I'm sorry. I would expect all of you have more than 150 Medicare patients. Matter of fact, we saw that data earlier. And then some information just about organization. Okay, none of you have got medical home recognition. Percentage of patients by race and preferred language. And that's demographics. Most EHRs can do that, and if not, I think you estimate it to the best of your ability, and that's accepted. So we will make sure this is available. That's information to have to sit down and do the application. And the actual application looks like this. This is the formal request for proposal. This is the one that has been revised for CPC Round 2, January 6th. The actual application starts on page 48, and we just want to scroll through this. So this is the questions. You fill this out site by site, and then you upload it to the Medicare's application portal. We were doing 27 sites at one time. We had most of the information gathered, and then it was two hard days doing that for everybody. So region, track 1 or track 2. If you are a track 2 applicant, but they don't think you qualify, do you want track 1? That's a yes or no question. Are you a concierge, rural health clinic, or FQHC? If you say yes, yeah, you might as well stop the application. Are you participating in any Medicare incentives? And these are other advanced pilots going on like NextGen ACO. So everybody here would say none of the above. Are you participating in an ACO or MSSP currently? So yes, with identifying information, tax ID. And here's some general questions about practice structure. So name, address, zip code, phone numbers. If you're owned by a larger organization, details about that organization. How many primary care providers, how many practice sites, how many share EHRs, etc. Model participation. Did you participate in CPC? Obviously you didn't. Are you part of the multi-payer advanced pilot? No. Then applicant contact. So this is usually a staff person or the manager who's filling out the application. Relationship, address, information. A practice contact. That's often, same. I think we use the same person, but it doesn't have to be. So there's a health information technology contact. If it's the same person, you can say that. Otherwise, it's a different person. Staff information. Anybody in the practice have an adverse legal action for Medicare enrollment? Usual question. Total number of providers that practice under their own MPI. Let's see. So for every provider, you have to list all that basic information. Just name, address, NPI, etc., board certification, etc. Full-time and part-time. Describe meaningful use participation in prior years. So they want the details about whether you did participate in meaningful use for 2016. So practice activities. So statement that characterizes the practice, single specialty, multi-specialty, etc. Are you engaged in training future practitioners? So if you have students or residents. If you have medical home certification, and that can include state-based recognition or an insurance plan recognition. So information about your HIT, vendor name, product name, version, etc. What is your EHR certification ID? If you're using CHIRT certified EHR, which you had to report meaningful use in PQRS, this number does exist. A lot of demographic patients, just % of your patients by race and ethnicity. Again, realize this is a controlled and massively expanded experiment in improving care. The first 4 years is outrageous success. Second 4 years, they just want to, and it can be best estimate. It doesn't have to be actual data unless your EHR puts it out. So this is just letting them stratify data and see if there's a difference in practices that have a high ethnicity quotient, etc. So here's information about revenue and budget. Most practice management systems or the practice accountant can provide this type of information. So revenue in 15 stratified by payer. Insurance payer mix is fairly standard. And then care delivery information. And these are the qualification questions for patients are not assigned to specific practitioner panels. If you say yes to that one, then you don't qualify for this essentially. So that however you do assign panels, non-physician team members, care plans are not routinely developed and recorded. So a risk level, I know you all are using HCC as well as the Blue Cross risk level. So follow-up, community-based resources, after-hours access, how your practice works, what quality improvement activities. Some of these, everybody in the ACO might answer those the same, so that might be some assistance in the applications. And then you have to have a letter of support from clinical leadership. So this would be whoever the president, CEO, chief physician, whoever the head clinician at each clinic would be, writes a letter supporting participation in CPC. If there's a parent-owner organization, if it's a AHEC or a hospital-owned practice, that president or CEO has to write a letter of support. You don't need the IT vendor letter if you are not applying for Track 2. So that skips a layer of complexity for you. And then there's a checklist. So that's the application. None of that is terribly complex. It just takes a little bit of time getting it all together.
I think that
We are at our time. I'll pause for questions. And then I am happy if there are additional questions when we run out of time, get them forwarded to Jolene and Dale, and we will answer them offline. I'm happy to do that.
Lee, I think, this is Jolene, I think there's also a letter that you need from the ACO, even though it's not said here. Once you get out on the application, and that a lot of this data is in the All Serpa ACO Basecamp CPC Plus, along with that letter and a list of clinics that will be applying. So.
Wow, I wish I'd had you organizing the data for our applications. So
what happens if you
I know I ran through those 20 pages really quickly. That was frankly just supposed to help demystify it a little bit. None of that stuff is scary. It's just going through the process. Go ahead. There was a question.
What happens if you only use half the money that you were given? What happens to the other half?
It goes to the bottom line, and then the care management fees. There is nothing in any of the documentation, the technical or the payment specifications, and I'd say the payment specification details are 180 pages. There's nothing in that says anything about taking back care management fees. I would say the ultimate or else is if they decide you're fraudulently participating, taking the money and not actually trying, then sure, Medicare can always say you broke the contract, we want the payment back. I think there is a ratio that if you said, well, we took all this money in care management fees, we didn't hire anybody, we're not doing care management, and we kept 92% of the money, that probably won't pass muster. We know, because we had some left over that went to the bottom line, that's okay. So where on that slippery slope of not okay going to totally okay, you draw the line as an individual decision. I think something like 25% or less, especially if you've proven you're doing all the basic elements and you're succeeding in meeting the requirements of CPC Plus, I do not see anything I've read or heard that gives me any heartburn they're going to say you didn't spend enough. No such thing.
If you have a diverse population, can you include interpreter expense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great use. And this is really a chance to say, okay, if we have 200 grand of new money coming to the practice, if we've ever sat around at lunch and bellyached about how hard it is to get patients into a counselor, or we have a Hmong community and no one speaks Vietnamese, or our patient, there's 3 pharmacies in town, don't we wish we had better communication with those pharmacists? This is the chance and the resources to do practice better.
Yeah, and ideally year one, you probably will have more funds than needed just because you're building the program. What do you need? So you guys are lucky because you've already got care managers, but like you said, you need a PharmD. How does that expense come? And, if you have restrictions on hiring different positions, it takes a little time. So you might have a surplus year one. Then you just justify it at the end of the year.
How about behavioral health?
It's not a requirement for Track 1. It is for Track 2. So we do use funds for our behavioral therapists that we have integrated into the system.
Can we for Track 1?
But if we already have a behavioral health specialist, a mental health specialist, can those funds be
Fantastic.
used for that?
Yeah, offset their salary and hire another one. I'm going to remind everybody, we've been through this. This is the CPC practice delivery requirements. It just helps you see on a fairly granular level. I have the level even deeper than this that I'm sure Jolene already has, but it just lets you know when you look, if you focus on just track one requirements, you all are doing much or most of this already. And so the hurdle for track one really is not too high. Well, Dale and Jolene, we're 5 minutes over. I appreciate the forbearance. I am happy to answer any questions that come in after the fact, and I hope this was useful.
Do you want to just make a comment about no CME?
I want to thank everybody that joined today. If you do have questions, please forward those on to us, and we'll get them on to Lee. There will be no CME for this session because it was just pretty question and answer, and so we did not get CME for that. Other than that, I want to thank everyone for coming.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Something like that.